Today, we are going to talk about indirect objects. The other day, we talked about direct objects, but today we'll be doing indirect objects. So go to your table of contents and add indirect objects. This is part of our language. When we did direct objects the other day, it didn't take up much of the page. So we actually have room to do our indirect objects notes on page 65 with our direct object notes, which is going to be a good idea. You'll see when we get to it. Okay. All right. So as we go to page 65, and always remember when we're doing a video, anytime you need to pause, you feel free to do that. Okay. All right. So on page 65, I had my pen marking our space. Okay. I want to remember something before we get started. We talked about a direct object last time being a complement. And remember, a complement is a sentence completer. Okay, when we took our notes on complements, okay, we said that some subjects and verbs don't even need a completer. Okay, they don't need a complement. Steve and Laura studied. It's fine like it is. Okay, but some of them do need a complement. The student found. We fixed that by adding a complement to it. Student found what? A moth, okay? Since we've done this lesson on complements, we have learned that moth is a direct object because we ask ourselves, student found what? Moth. So on this particular lesson, we were calling this a complement. But since then, we have learned that that particular complement was a direct object. Okay, so today we're going to talk about indirect objects, and it's great that it's going on this page because an indirect object is another form of a complement. Okay, so make a divider. I'm going to use the bumpy cloud divider. You make any type you'd like. Okay, so today we're going to talk about indirect objects. Okay, all right, so think about this. If our abbreviation for a direct object was DO, then what does it make sense that an indirect object's abbreviation is going to be? It is going to be IO for indirect object. Now here's what's neat. You guys have the practice that I have seen. You've been doing great choosing direct objects. Some of them, we're going to do the same thing for our indirect objects that we did for direct objects. We're going to kind of make a list, okay? So to find an indirect object, there's a couple of things. An indirect object, just like a direct object at the top of the page, an indirect object will be a noun or pronoun. Okay. Now, when we did direct object, the second thing that we listed is that a direct object would follow an action verb. Okay. Well, we have something that kind of lets us know where to look in our sentence for an indirect object. An indirect object is going to always be a certain place in a sentence. It's going to be between the action verb and the direct object. Okay, between the action verb and the direct object. So now let's think about this. If it has to be between the action verb and the direct object, what if it's a sentence that doesn't even need a direct object, like Steve and Laura studied? That sentence, remember, did not need a complement at all. So here's a special note, okay? All right. All right, no direct object? Well, guess what? If there's no direct object, then there is no indirect object. You have got to have a direct object in your sentence to be able to have an indirect object, because the indirect object is between the action verb and direct object. So no direct object, that means you have no indirect object. So if you're given an assignment where you have to search for things, and one of the things you have to do is locate direct objects, indirect objects. If you get to a sentence that doesn't have a direct object, then you can't even spend any of your time looking for an indirect object because it's always located between the action verb and the direct object. Okay, now for direct object, we gave a couple of questions that it answers when we're finding a direct object. We also have that same thing going on with an indirect object. All right, so it answers some questions. Now, if you remember direct object, I'm going to slide up in our notes. Direct object answers what or whom. When we found the action, Tyler found, we ask ourselves, Tyler found what? Or Tyler found whom? Tyler found what? His dog. I called whom? My aunt. Okay. All right. So remember, if we're going to find an indirect object, that direct object is already going to be there. That means we're going to have a word that has already told us what or whom received the action. Okay. So this time it answers the question for or to what, for or to whom. Okay, so when you find the direct object and you have answered your question, what or whom received the action, then you're going to ask yourself, okay, we're going to take it a step farther. For what or to what, for whom or to whom. Okay, so let's put a couple of examples so that's going to make a little bit more sense. Okay, all right, show examples. All right, I sent, excuse me, y'all know I don't, I sent, that's a T, my mom a card. Okay. All right, so let's follow the steps of finding a direct object because we can't have an indirect object if we don't have a direct object. Okay, subject is I. Okay, what is my action verb? Sent. Okay, so let's follow the rules for direct object. I sent what? Well, I sent a card. So here's my direct object. Okay, so I do have a direct object, which means I can look for an indirect object. And remember this, my indirect object is going to be between my action verb and my direct object. Okay, and in this sentence, that's kind of a no-brainer because that's the only part of the sentence you have left, but that may not always be the case. All right, so now let's go through the questions. I sent what? I sent a card. Okay, I sent a card to what, to whom? I sent a card to my mom. Okay, so mom, if you had to pick one word, mom is your indirect object. So this follows all of the rules. Okay, it's a noun. It is between the action verb and the direct object, and it answers the question to whom. Okay, all right, let's look at another one. Phil gave me a piece of paper. Okay. All right. Now, I want us to remember a few things. Okay. First of all, let's go ahead. Let's find our subject, Phil. Okay. What did Phil do? Phil gave. Okay. I want us to pause right here and remember that we're not ever going to find our direct objects or our indirect objects in a prepositional phrase. Okay, so let's look at this sentence and find prepositional phrases. Of is a preposition. To find the phrase, ask yourself, of what? Well, of paper. Okay, so we have this marked. That means we cannot look here for direct or indirect objects, okay? So we can kind of forget that this part of the sentence is even there. So Phil gave what? Well, Phil gave a piece, okay? So that's my direct object. Phil gave a piece to whom? Well, he gave it to me. So me is the indirect object. So just always remember while you're doing this, remember to mark your prepositional phrases. Always pay attention to those, okay? Because prepositional phrases will not contain your direct object or your indirect object, okay? Now, here's something too to go with all of this. You can't have an indirect object without a direct object. I'm going to slide back up here to the top part of the page. Well, direct objects only follow action verbs. So let's think about this. I have to have an action verb to have a direct object. And then I have to have a direct object to be able to have an indirect object. So really, if there's not an action verb, then there's no need in even thinking about a direct object or an indirect object, okay? So we're going to begin practicing with using indirect objects. I think it worked out great that these notes are on the same piece of paper. If you have a highlighter, I think it would be a good idea to highlight direct objects, highlight this title, and then highlight your indirect objects title so it can kind of stand out that you have two different sets of notes on this same page. But since they are so closely connected, it is perfect that they are on the same page. All right, and if you need to pause this to finish taking your notes, go ahead and take care of that. And we are going to look as we do this. Let me make sure I'm looking at the right thing. Yes, okay. We are going to look at page 275 from your book. Okay, so if you need to pause this to finish these notes, that's fine. When you're finished with your notes, then unpause it, and we're going to peek at the page in your book that covers this. Okay, so unpause this when you're ready. In the meantime, I'm going to go ahead, and this is the page from your book, okay? And Ms. White just made a copy of it. I circled the important things that we put in our notes. If you'll notice, in our notes, we kept this a little more simple. Instead, I sent my mom a card, okay? But we used these sentences to put in our notes. So this is in your book. This is your blue box, okay? So we have taken notes on this. So a couple of reminders that they have here is that only action verbs have objects. The sentence doesn't have an action verb. It will not have a direct or an indirect object. We discussed this when we were doing our notes. Indirect objects come between the action verb and direct object in our notes. Look for a direct object first, then look for an indirect object. Okay, so what they want us to do down here, just as practice, since we've just started doing this, is they've given us a few sentences to practice with. Okay, so we're going to label this sentence with the parts of speech that we've been working on recently anyway. All right, we're using the same abbreviations. Action verb is AV, the subject is S, direct object is DO, and we're adding the indirect object as IO. And they took care of the first one for us. Father bought me a puppy. Father bought what? Puppy. For whom? For me. Okay. So, number 2. Mom made me a birthday cake. Subject is mom. Okay. Well, what is our action verb here? Well, mom made. Okay, now I would suggest after you find your action verb, that's a great time to always stop and see if you have any prepositional phrases. No prepositions in this sentence, so we don't have a prepositional phrase. So mom made what? Well, mom made a cake, so that's my direct object. Well, mom made a cake for whom? Well, she made it for me, so that's our indirect object. Okay. Number 3, do you owe him anything? Okay, remember this, when it's a question, we can rephrase it as a statement, all right, to give us an idea of what the parts of speech are. So that would be, you do owe him anything, or you do. So let's think about this. What is our subject in the sentence? Our subject is you, okay? What is our action verb? Okay, our action verb is do. It's a verb phrase. Okay. Well, you do owe what? Well, you do owe anything. Okay. You do owe anything to whom? To him. So there's your indirect object. Okay. Questions sometimes are a little more tricky to find the parts of speech. All right. Just think through it. Number 4, give the dog his dinner. Okay. Give the dog his dinner. So, what's the subject of this sentence? Who's doing this? Remember this, boys and girls. When your first word is a verb and this is an imperative, you're being told to do something, that is a huge time for you to stop and look and see. There's a good chance that your subject is an understood you, and it is in this sentence. So, you give, okay, any prepositions? No, no prepositions. Okay, so you give what? Well, you give dinner. Okay, you give dinner to what or whom? Well, you give dinner to the dog. So there's your indirect object. All right, so here's what I want you to do. I want you to pause it for a second, and I want you to try the rest of them. When you're finished trying the rest of them, unpause and come back, and I'll be going over the answers so you can check yourself. If I'm showing you the answers and you need to change it to correct it, I want you to change it with your red pen. Okay, so pause button, try the rest of them, and then unpause so we can talk about them. Okay, so you should have the rest of these done. So bring me your test papers. Okay, the subject. Well, this starts with a verb and it's an imperative. You're being told to do something. Okay, so this is another one that understood you is the subject. You bring, let's look. I don't see any prepositions, no prepositions. You bring what? You bring papers. You bring papers to whom? To me. Okay. All right. Look at number 6. I will make myself some lunch. Okay. I. Okay. Mark it with an S for subject. All right. What will I do? Well, I will make. I'm just going to put AV over prepositional phrase. Verb phrase. Okay. I will make. Let's look for prepositions. We don't have any. I will make what? I will make lunch. I will make lunch for whom? Well, I'm making it for myself. I'm a little bit hungry, so I'm just going to do it myself. All right. Number 7, read me the instructions again. Okay, let's see. We're starting with a verb. We're being told to do something. Our subject is understood you. Okay. What my action verb is read. Okay. So you read. Let's look for prepositions. We don't have any. You read what? Well, you read the instructions. You read instructions to whom? To me. Indirect object. Okay. Every time, boys and girls, the rules have stayed exactly like we put in our notes. Our indirect object every time has been between our action verb and our direct object. Every time it has answered the question to whom, for whom, to what, or for what. Okay, 3 more. Tell me the story of Jesus. All right, I'm starting with a verb. It's an imperative. I'm being told to do something. We have another understood you. Okay, so that's our subject. You, action verb is tell. Okay, you tell. Let's freeze and see if we have any prepositions. We do. Of is a preposition. That prepositional phrase of what? Of Jesus. Okay, there's my prepositional phrase. So that lets me know when I'm finding my direct and indirect objects, I won't even use this phrase. Okay, so you tell what? Well, you tell the story. That is the direct object. You tell story to, well, to me. So that's the indirect object. All right. 9, I bought myself a pair of boots. I is the subject. Well, what did I do? I bought. Okay, let's phrase and look for prepositions. Okay, we have of. Ask yourself, of what? Of boots. Prepositional phrase. We will not use this to find any of the parts of speech for this direct object or indirect object assignment. I bought what? I bought a pair. Pair is my direct object. I bought a pair for whom? For myself. Just like I made lunch for myself, I bought myself a pair of boots. Okay, last one. The mockers gave Jesus a crown of thorns. Okay, so the subject. Who's this sentence about? The mockers. Okay, what is my action verb? What did they do? They gave. Okay, before we do anything else, we are going to look for prepositional phrases. Okay, of. Okay, of is a preposition. Ask yourself, of what? Of thorns. Okay, so mockers gave what? What did they give? Mockers gave, they gave a crown. Okay, mockers gave a crown to whom? To Jesus. That is our indirect object. So we have found all of our direct and indirect objects on this entire page. And yes, the mockers did give Jesus a crown of thorns. Okay, but they realized that they were mistaken in mocking him when he proved himself to be truly the King of Kings, and there's so much comfort in that. Okay, all of them didn't realize it, of course, but we know that one centurion did. He realized that this truly was the Son of God and is today still. Okay, so direct and indirect objects. We'll continue to practice with this as we go along. This will be on our next test, so be sure that that you understand it well, and we will be talking about it more.